Welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please welcome your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show, the only internet radio show dedicated to giving you real solutions to improve your health. Not only are they real solutions, but they're natural solutions as well, because as you know, the one and only true wealth you have is your health. I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc, and I'm committed to helping you find the root cause of your health problem, fix the cause with natural treatments so you can feel normal again and live your life to the fullest. Today's topic is all about mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, and all things mushroom related. I'm so very excited about today's show because my special guest is Jeff Chilton. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Jeff Chilton studied ethno-mycology at the University of Washington in the late 60s, a founding member of the World Society for Mushroom Biology and Mushroom Products, and a member of the International Society for Mushroom Science. Mr. Chilton's company was the first to offer a complete line of certified organic mushroom extracts to the U.S. nutritional supplement industry. Nammex extracts are used by many supplement companies and are noted for their high quality based on scientific analysis of the active compounds. Jeff, thank you so much for being my special guest today on this episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show.
Hi, Dr. Carri. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Full disclosure, I've never heard of ethno-mycology. So what got you interested in these mushrooms?
Well, I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle area. And the Seattle area is, we've got lots of forests, we've got lots of rain. And so in those forests and everywhere else, we see mushrooms coming up. And at an early age, I was able to get out and do some mushroom hunts with, parents of friends. And I just kind of took a fancy to them. And when I got to university, well, my actual major was in anthropology, and mushrooms I was still very interested in, so I started to study the use of mushrooms by indigenous cultures worldwide and found that certain mushrooms were used in native healing ceremonies and other mushrooms were used as food, and so that just kind of got me started, and it became my field of study. So here's the thing that when I left university, of course, I can't get a job in anthropology of all things, and there's not many positions for that. So I went to my mycology professor, and I said, well, I'd really like to kind of grow mushrooms, and he pointed me to a very large mushroom farm that was 60 miles away. And I went down there, I applied for a job, and I ended up getting a job, and I was just totally excited about it. And I ended up staying there for the next 10 years.
Mushrooms are not like typical plants. What makes them different?
Well, mushrooms are in between animals and humans, and one of the things that you have to understand about mushrooms is that a mushroom is just one part of this organism. The mushroom is like the apple on the tree. That's the fruit. And what we don't see is something called mycelium, which is in the ground, in a tree or in wood. And that mycelium is a fine network, thread-like network that absorbs nutrients mushrooms are decomposers. This organism is a decomposing organism. Without mushrooms, we would be deep in all of the leaves and branches and all the rest of that organic litter that's out there. So they're decomposing and helping us out. But the mushroom is this, what we call a fruit body. It is the fruit of this mycelial organism. So and that's what we see, and that's what we end up eating, and that's really the part that we're discussing today is this mushroom.
So can you talk about the nutritional value of mushrooms? When I interviewed Dr. Terry Walls of the Walls Protocol fame, one of the things that she recommends is that her patients eat 9 cups of vegetables every day, and that they should always get a daily dose of mushrooms in their diet.
Oh, good for her. That's wonderful. You know, the nutritionists, classical nutritionists, have always looked at mushrooms as nothing more than a garnish and something that's flavorful. But the fact of the matter is the reason they spoke this way was because mushrooms are very low in calories. But mushrooms actually are a fantastic food. They've got a good amount of protein for a vegetable. It could be anywhere from 20 to 40% protein. They've got a high level of very quality carbohydrates, and they're also really high in fiber. So mushrooms are going to feed our microbiome because they pass through us relatively undigested. But that fiber, and here's what's really interesting about mushrooms, is that their cell wall is made up of a compound called beta-glucan. And maybe you've heard of beta-glucans because they're in yeast, but mushroom beta-glucans are what have the immunologically active compounds in them. So that's where all the research has been focused in terms of the activity of mushrooms. So when we're eating mushrooms, we are getting those beta-glucans, and then when we supplement with different mushroom, what we'd call medicinal mushrooms, we're getting those beta-glucans in a little more concentrated form. So in terms of being a good food, mushrooms are not only healthy for us as we eat them, but also through supplementation. And what I like to think about with mushrooms is that, to me, they're one of what we would call a nutraceutical, and they're something where they are food and food as medicine. So I'm always telling people, put mushrooms into your diet before you even think about supplementation. Put them into your diet, eat them, and there's some delicious, delicious mushrooms out there. And let me tell you, as somebody who's worked on a mushroom farm and for 10 years and lived with mushrooms, literally lived with mushrooms, I love eating them. They taste wonderful, and I encourage all your listeners, try the mushrooms if you haven't eaten them already, but they're a delicious and wonderful food that also will act as a medicine.
So if I'm understanding this right, Jeff, all mushrooms have a certain amount of beta-glucans, but medicinal mushrooms have more concentration of beta-glucans.
Absolutely right. Yeah, because this beta-glucan is found in the cell walls of mushrooms, every mushroom will have a certain amount of those beta-glucans. But what happens is that the beta-glucan has a very distinctive architecture, and each mushroom will have a little bit different architecture. So certain mushrooms, their beta-glucan is more active than the other mushrooms, and those particular mushrooms are what we would call the medicinal mushrooms. And there are probably, just to give you an idea, I have a book that is from China, and this book lists 270 different species as being medicinal. And you're sort of like, oh my God, where do we start with this? Well, in traditional Chinese medicine, they focused on about a dozen of these species, and scientists have now demonstrated that those particular species have this active beta-glucan architecture, and some of them even have other compounds in there that are very healthful. But that's the difference. The difference is in the way that particular beta-glucan is structured.
And so can you talk about the benefits from taking mushrooms? Mushrooms that we get at our typical grocery store versus medicinal mushrooms.
Sure. Well, again, believe it or not, those mushrooms that we get, that the ones that I was growing in the beginning at this very large mushroom farm, and what we see in almost all of the markets, that particular mushroom actually has medicinal values. It's not as well known as some of the other ones, but the what you should think about when you think about medicinal mushrooms is prevention, and that's I think their biggest benefit is when we consume them, they are going to sit in the background. They're what's called a host defense potentiator. So there's something that if we need some help immunologically, they will activate. If we don't, they'll still kind of sit there, but they're there and they can help us. And in a sense, they're what are considered to be an adaptogen. And an adaptogen, the whole focus of these types of herbs or foods is they promote harmony and balance. And for me, Dr. Carri, when I think about health, I think about it in terms of balance. What has become out of balance? What is it that is harming us in that sense? So it's sort of like this whole idea of a yin and a yang, or just rather than looking at it as, oh, we've been attacked by something that we've got to fight it. No, I look at it as okay, we're out of balance. Where is it that we can modify what we're doing, our behavior, or what we're consuming to bring us more back into this balanced position? And that's where mushrooms really come in. There's something that are going to help us to maintain that balance. They're going to support adrenal function, build endurance, counteract stress. So that's how you really have to think about it, because that's where they're working. They're sort of working. They're not going to work immediately. So if somebody takes it and expects something to happen, and tomorrow they'll no longer have that cold or that flu or whatever it is, that's not how they work. You really have to be taking them in a regular way, and then they will be there to help you when you are challenged in some way.
So then, tell me if I have this right or wrong. Basically, you're saying that all mushrooms have some amount of immune balancing or immunomodulating effect and an adaptogenic effect. So it helps balance our immune system and it helps balance our stress.
Yes, that's absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's how they've been used traditionally. Now, in saying that, there are specific mushrooms that have certain activities that go beyond that. For example, reishi mushroom. Reishi mushroom is considered to be something, it's got these special compounds in them called triterpenoids, and those are something that work with our liver. And so if someone has liver difficulties, you'd want to be taking reishi. That would help with purifying the blood. In fact, on one of my trips to China, I was at a conference and I spoke with a traditional Chinese physician, an older man who told me reishi was his primary herb that he used for the liver. And I thought, well, that's really interesting to hear, because that's what a lot of the research tells us as well. So there are specific mushrooms that will act in that. Another's lion's mane. Lion's mane has been used traditionally for dementia. Well, now they've got some studies out. There's a recent study in Japan where actual placebo-controlled study where two groups of 30 patients each. One took lion's mane for 90 days. The other didn't. After 90 days, and this is a study where they're taking certain tests to demonstrate cognitive ability. After the 90 days, the group taking the lion's mane showed an increased cognition and memory. The interesting part about this study was that after they stopped taking lion's mane, 30 days later, they tested them again, and they went back to the baseline. Now, I'm not sure whether that means you're going to have to take lion's mane forever at some point, but the fact is it did sort of demonstrate that the lion's mane did have this type of activity. So certain mushrooms will have other activities that can be useful to us when we're looking at medicinal mushrooms and say, well, which one should I take, and which one is more powerful, and what are the different attributes of these mushrooms? So there are different attributes for the different mushroom species.
And for our listeners who want to learn more about those aspects, what do you recommend for them?
In terms of where they can get information, or just what particular mushrooms to take for what?
Yes, both.
Well, we have a lot of information on our website. We have general information, specific information. We have references there that people can look for. There and plus there's a lot of information out on the internet. Now, having said that, let me just give you a caveat, because one of the things that I really do not like is there are companies on the internet, and they will make claims for mushrooms that, for example, right now, if you search on chaga, you will discover that chaga does just about everything in the world, that it can help you no matter what's your problem, it will help. They promote it as a panacea. I'm very, very opposed to this kind of talk and this kind of presentation about mushrooms, because to me, there are things that medicinal mushrooms will do, and primarily getting back to the beta-glucans and the immunological work that these mushrooms will do. But when people tout mushrooms as something that will have 100 different benefits, and they will push it out there as, for example, chaga. Now, a lot of companies say, "Oh,
Yeah,
this is the."
I know chaga is very popular right now. So I'm glad that you're bringing it up, Jeff.
Well, and it's being sold as the king of mushrooms. And what's interesting, Dr. Carri, is that having been in the mushroom industry a long time, back in the 70s, the king of mushrooms was being touted as shiitake. And then in the 80s, the king was being touted as reishi. Yep. And then in the 90s, the king was maitake, and now it is chaga. So please look past the marketing hype. It's not helpful for anybody. It's just people trying to sell products. And for me, and what I want to do, and what I do with my company is if a mushroom has been used traditionally, if there's a history of traditional use, and there is with chaga, then I look towards the science and I research, okay, what does science tell us? Are there studies that actually demonstrate activity in certain ways? Then that's something that then I will say, okay, this mushroom is an important medicinal mushroom and has some value out there, and then that's something that I will offer to people. But otherwise, the last thing in the world that I want to do, or that I think is valid, is to make claims about the hundreds of different things that these mushrooms will do. And here's what it's based on a lot of times is, scientists will take any given plant or mushroom, they're looking for activity, they'll refine it, they'll pull out a fraction, they'll test it against something, and then they will say, oh, we've demonstrated activity with this mushroom against some particular disease. And what's happened is okay, that's all valid research, but they've taken something that maybe occurs in a very small amount, they've tested against something, and nobody's going to get that benefit from the mushroom. It's interesting from a scientific point of view, but a lot of times what they're doing is simply drug discovery. They're just looking for some compound that ultimately they can refine into a drug, and that's a world away from what we're talking about here, which is consuming mushrooms as a food and or taking let's just say a mushroom extract as a nutritional supplement. So you have to be very careful when you're looking at the research.
Jeff, 3 years ago, you published a white paper that had a profound effect on the nutritional supplement industry. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, yes. I took 95 samples, and these samples consisted of dried mushrooms, and the dried mushrooms, just the straight dried mushrooms, is what we used as a baseline for our studies. This is what we looked for, a profile. I took mushroom extracts, and I also bought 40 different retail products. And we tested these products for beta-glucans, and in the beta-glucan test, they also had compounds called alpha-glucans, and alpha-glucans are starches. And we also tested for triterpenoids in the reishi and for a compound called ergosterol. Ergosterol is really interesting because it's the fungal sterol, very similar to our cholesterol, but it's ergosterol. It's what a fungus produces. Ergosterol actually is a provitamin D. So when you expose mushrooms to sunlight, ergosterol will actually turn into vitamin D. So you can actually get vitamin D from mushrooms by exposing them to the UV light in sunlight. But we were able to use ergosterol. It's one of those tests to demonstrate the amount of fungal matter in a product. And this is where things really got interesting, because a lot of products that are being sold as mushroom supplements are not actually mushroom. And this gets back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of the stages or the different parts of this organism that we often refer to as a mushroom. People, rather than selling the mushroom, which is what has been used traditionally, they will grow this mycelium, which is the vegetative body. They will grow it in a laboratory on sterilized grain. So you can imagine they take this grain, they put it into plastic autoclavable bags, they sterilize it, they inoculate it with the mycelium. This mycelium will grow over all of this grain. It won't consume it, but it'll grow over this grain, and after 30 to 60 days, they will take this bag of myceliated grain and they will dry it and grind it to a powder without removing the grain. Now, what we discovered in our beta-glucan tests was that it ended up that the beta-glucans in these products were very, very low. They were on average about 6%, whereas an actual mushroom and a mushroom extract had anywhere from 25 to 60% beta-glucan, and that's what we want. We want beta-glucans in the product. A mushroom does not have starch. These products were absolutely full of starch from the grain that was the main part of them, because the grain was not removed at the end of the process. So they ended up being very high in alpha-glucan, which are the starches, which is the exact opposite of what you would see in a mushroom. A mushroom actually doesn't even contain starch, and it gets back to where mushrooms fit in with plants and animals, and mushrooms, believe it or not, they produce glycogen, just like we produce glycogen as our storage carbohydrate. But the amount of glycogen they produce is very low. It's maybe 1 to 5% max. Well, these myceliated grain products actually were a lot of them were 40, 50, 60% starch. And the beta-glucan level was just the absolute opposite of what you would expect to get from a truly mushroom product. So we, in a sense, with my study, exposed what I would consider to be an adulteration of products out there. And believe it or not, the majority of mushroom supplements on the market are these types of products. And so for me, I published my study, and the interesting part about it was that my study was corroborated by other studies that came later. One of the studies that was recently published by United States Pharmacopoeia, which is a huge organization in the United States that makes the standards that are used for pharmaceuticals, for herbal products. They did a study on reishi mushroom, very deep study, and in their study, they determined that only 5 of 19 mushroom products, and they did the same thing I did. They bought these products off the internet. They're bottled products. Only 5 of 19 were actually reishi mushroom, that you could actually consider them reishi mushroom. And what was interesting is that I had been in contact with them during the study, and 3 of our extracts that we sent to them were part of that group of 5 mushrooms that passed their tests. And I completely knew this was going to be the case when I did my study, because the fact is I know the process. I know how this process works with growing mycelium on grain. And when you don't separate the grain out from the final product, it's only common sense that you end up with a lot of starch from the residual grain. So this is something that people really need to be aware of when they're looking at going to buy a mushroom product. And the only place that you can actually discover this is if you were to turn it around and look at the supplements facts panel. And there, if you're lucky, these products might say mycelium, and in the other, where you list other ingredients in this particular supplement, sometimes a company will say myceliated oats or myceliated rice. Those are giveaways right there, because what happens is, and this is what's really deceitful, Dr. Carri, is when you look at the front panel at the label, it will say reishi mushroom, shiitake mushroom, and it will have a picture of a mushroom. Sometimes it'll actually say on there, made with 100% organic mushrooms. Well, it's just simply not true.
So as you were speaking about your white paper and the research you did, so basically you're saying that they took these mushrooms and they grew them in abnormal conditions, conditions that are not what Mother Nature intended. And so then the end product is different. Just like so in my head I'm thinking, well, that's also kind of the difference between free range pastured chicken eggs versus chicken eggs that are factory farmed, chickens that are shoved into little cages and never see the light of day, or cattle that are like fed grass as Mother Nature intended versus cattle that are fed grains. Like the end product is radically different.
Well, and it goes beyond,
from a nutritional perspective.
Well, and it goes far beyond that, because actually what's happening is we don't have a chicken at the end of the line. We don't have a cow at the end of the line. What we have is this other stage of this organism, and there's a world of difference between this mycelium and the actual mushroom. The mushroom produces a lot of compounds that the mycelium does not produce. The mycelium is a fairly its purpose out there is to amass nutrients and then put up this mushroom. It's a fairly simple part of this plant that we call a mushroom. So when we're talking about it, and this is where it gets very confusing, because people will use the term mushroom when in fact that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a completely different stage. For example, we could call something ginseng, and in a sense, okay, ginseng, but there's a difference between the root and the leaves or the stalk. Just like if we take an apple, there's a big difference between that apple and the actual tree itself. One way to look at the mycelium is to look at them as the root system that ultimately produces this mushroom. So what happens is these companies talk mushroom, and people, it's very confusing, because people think, okay, what about this mushroom product? Well, I say, well, first of all, it's not a mushroom product. A mushroom is what you can look at and see. It's growing out of the ground or in whatever it grows in. So that is the mushroom. What we're talking about is the mycelium here that is grown in a laboratory. It's not even grown under natural conditions. And this is something that is very important, because the mushroom that is produced by this mycelium, it's a lot of the important compounds that are in that mushroom come from the wood that it's growing in. So it needs the wood, because the wood has precursor compounds that allow it to produce some things like the triterpenoids, for instance, without that wood, you're not going to get those important compounds that you would get in reishi mushrooms. So not only is this fungal organism not getting the correct nutrition, but what's happening is you're being sold something that doesn't even have mushroom in it. What it has is it has this mycelial stage, which is what we call the vegetative body, and what it's grown on. So think about that for a second. Okay, you go out and you harvest a plant, and you pull up the soil, and you take the soil with it, and you consume the soil. That's not what you want to be consuming. There's nothing wrong with mycelium, nothing at all. And mycelium gets produced in liquid culture and can be sold in its pure form. So it's 100% mycelium, but this is mycelium that's actually grown on grain, and the grain does not get removed from it. Think about it as, are you familiar with the product called tempeh?
Yes.
Okay, tempeh. Tempeh, Dr. Carri, is actually fungal mycelium that is grown on cooked soybeans. It's a food. So when you see tempeh and you buy tempeh, you get it, you open it up, and here's this really interesting white block. You slice it, and you see the soybeans in there, and so you've got this white mycelium. You've got the soybeans in there. That's a really novel and interesting food that's been manufactured for, who knows, thousands of years in Asia. It's a great food, but it's mostly soy. And this is very similar to what these companies are producing and calling mushroom. They're not producing mushroom. They're producing mycelium on a grain, and that's what they give you in the final product. And unfortunately, what it turns out is that product ends up being mostly starch from the residual grains that are in it, and they don't have the compounds that you would get out of a mushroom that has been grown on its natural food source, which, interestingly enough, most medicinal mushrooms are grown on wood, and they're wood decomposers.
Okay, so from a very practical standpoint, if I go to the grocery store, or if I'm on the internet looking for medicinal mushroom, supplement.
Yes.
So I'm looking for a medicinal mushroom product. What should I be looking for on the label? What is the red flag that this is probably garbage? And what is it that I'm looking for that says this is a great product?
Okay. The real tell on this is if it says made in the USA. Isn't that interesting? Because, I'm all for local products, totally for local products. But the issue is that as a mushroom grower, and that's my trade from way back as a mushroom grower, I can grow mushrooms in North America, and I can take my mushrooms to the marketplace, and I can get $5 a pound for those mushrooms, and I'm very satisfied. I make a profit. However, supplements are sold dry. So a mushroom, like most vegetables, is 90% water. So the minute I take that pound of mushrooms that I've gotten $5 for and I dry it out, now I have to get $50 for that same pound of mushrooms. So the reason why these myceliated grain products are manufactured in the United States is because economically you cannot grow the mushroom and sell it as a supplement. The economics are not there. And that's the big issue. And let me just say this about what we do is in 1989, I made my first trip to China. I traveled throughout China all through the 90s. I visited farms. I went to conferences. I visited factories. I went to scientific research institutes. It was amazing. China's the birthplace of mushroom cultivation in the 12th century. In 1997, I went to China with OCIA, which is a one of the largest organic certification companies in the United States. I took OCIA to China with me, and I organized in fact, the very first workshop for organic mushroom cultivation in China, 1997. I totally believe in organic certification. I consider it very, very important because the food that I eat or sell, I want it to be clean. So within a few years, we had organically certified mushrooms coming out of China, and these mushrooms were not being certified by Chinese certifiers. They were being certified by German companies. So, and when we sell our products and when they come to us, because our mushrooms are processed over there, we contract for mushrooms from small farms. They take them to our processors. We process them into extract form. Before they leave China, we test them for heavy metals. We test them for pesticides. We test them for microbiological. When they arrive in the United States to go to our warehouse, we test them again. Every product is tested at least twice, and we cannot sell them if they don't meet those standards that are out there, especially for heavy metals and especially for pesticides. I mean, every product we sell is tested twice because, everybody thinks of China and they think, oh my God, I would never consume anything that was produced in China. And I understand that. I understand that totally. And I know China very well. And yes, just like in North America, we have areas that are heavily polluted. You look down at the Gulf Coast or something like the Gulf Coast of Texas or those places, polluted. And we've been trying to get over that in North America. So going to China like I did, I'm like, after realizing that I can't grow mushrooms in North America and sell them as a supplement, the economics are not there. I have to do it in China. So I took an organic certifier with me, and we established that in China. And there are places where we grow our mushrooms where the environment is quite clean, and we've got people there supervising the process where what we get is not a polluted product. It's a high-quality product. So the red flag, getting back to this, is it made in the USA? And here's the thing that is so difficult, is that those USA products, which are myceliated grain, they'll say certified organic, they'll say kosher, they'll say made in a GMP certified facility, they're vegan, they're vegetarian, they'll have all of the merit badges on it. And so a person would go, wow, this is great. If it says made in the USA, look very, very closely and call them if you want, if you're uncertain, because those products, and look at the label on the back. Does it say mycelium? Does it say myceliated grain or oats or something like that in the other? Those are what you have to look for, and that can tip you off right away. And listen, the interesting part about this is that a lot of these stores where you go into, the people working there, and a lot of them are very knowledgeable, but even the knowledgeable ones don't know that much about mushrooms, and a lot of them have simply read the literature and been trained by the people that are selling these mushroom products to them, and they will point you to a product and say, oh, this is a really great product, not really knowing. I've spoken to these people. Most of them don't really know what's going on. So this is something that's very important, because if you want to get the real benefits from a medicinal mushroom, you want to get the mushroom. You don't want to get a lot of grain powder.
Okay, so then to recap, you said if on the label it says made in the USA or mycelium or myceliated grain,
Yep.
Those
right.
are that tells that this is garbage.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm very hesitant to use that word, because then I get,
I'll use it. I'll be the one to use it today.
Dr. Carri, you know what? This is the thing. You have experienced people, the same people that I have experienced, where I get a phone call and the person says, hi, I have cancer and I'm looking for a medicinal mushroom product, and can you help? Can you imagine? Can you imagine those people going out there? And you know what? I've also found a lot of naturopaths, a lot of herbalists, a lot of practitioners don't know either I'm still educating those people because they don't know. And there are people out there on the internet and the people that sell these products out there that are looked upon by some as gurus, and they're looked upon as people that know, and most people know nothing about mushrooms. And so they're like, well, this person says that this product is good, or his product is good, or so I'm gonna go with them because he knows and I don't. So that's what happens. People know green plants. They know herbs, and they can talk to herbalists and things like that. But herbalists and naturopaths, they too have been bamboozled by this.
So Jeff, is there anything on the label that will tell us that this is likely to be a really good product?
Well, one of the things that we do is that we test our products for beta-glucans. And here's what's really interesting, Dr. Carri, is that the beta-glucan, we've been able to identify a test for specific mushroom beta-glucans, very specific, and this test unmasks everything. So all of our products will say X amount of beta-glucans. Some of these other products will say polysaccharides. And that's what's really interesting, because beta-glucans are polysaccharides, but you know what else are polysaccharides? Starches. So products that talk about polysaccharides just go, okay, that's not what I'm interested in, because that polysaccharides could be, I mean, some extracts are made with carrier materials like maltodextrin and dextrose. So if you're measuring a product by polysaccharide, it is absolutely meaningless. What you'd want to look for is does it talk about beta-glucans? I mean, one of the things that we do, and the companies that buy from us, they will put on their label X amount of beta-glucans. That's one thing you can look for. The other thing is, if you've got one of these mushroom products right now, I urge you, open up the capsule, taste it. What does it taste like? Most of these products are bland. They're bland because of the grain. Sometimes they're a little bit sweet because of the grain. Can you imagine you've got a reishi product and it says reishi mushroom. You open it up, reishi's bitter. You open up this product and you taste it and it's like, it tastes kind of sweet. That is because it's mostly grain. It's not a reishi product. Or, believe it or not, some of the manufacturers of these products, when they're out there selling, because they're selling it to the food market, they will say things like, and our products do not taste like mushroom. And I'm thinking, my God, you're actually saying that? There's a reason why they don't taste like mushroom, because they say, it will go with anything. It doesn't taste like mushroom. It's like, well, wouldn't I want it to taste like mushroom if it's a real mushroom product? I mean, some of the mushrooms are delicious. Shiitake. Pour out that shiitake and see what it tastes like. It should be rich in flavor. Shiitake is a wonderful flavor. But these myceliated grain products taste mostly like grain powder, and most of them look the same. They'll be kind of a light color. Mushrooms will have, some of them will have very dark brown colors. Some of them will be light, like a lion's mane will be light, but taste it. Does it have a mushroom taste, or does it taste like basic flour? That's a real tell. And, we do a reishi challenge when we're out there doing a trade show or something, where we'll have a little dish of reishi extract. We'll have a little dish of one of these myceliated grain product, and people will taste the myceliated grain and go, that tastes kind of good. Yeah, a little bit sweet. Yeah, not bad. And then they taste the reishi extract with all the bitterness in it, and they go, oh my God, that tastes medicinal. Yeah, it does. That's what real reishi should taste like.
Okay, so a good product would have, it should say on the ingredients label, beta-glucans, and should
Correct.
have a relative amount, like contains, more than 20% or 25% beta-glucans.
Generally speaking, that's correct. And also make sure that, again, that it doesn't say mycelium somewhere on that back panel, because that would be an immediate, like, okay. And look, some of these products, what they say and what they'll sell on, they'll say, this has got, this is what they'll say a full spectrum, and we have mycelium, we have what they call fruiting body, which is their term for a mushroom. We have spores. We have other compounds in there. So we are full spectrum. This is absolutely nonsense, because the fact is that those companies do not produce mushrooms, and if they do, it might be in there in a small amount. But what they actually reference, if you get down to the details, is they say, oh, at a certain point, our myceliated grain produces primordia. And a primordia is the very initial stage of a mushroom. And that primordia is about the size of the head of a pin. It is still nothing more than an aggregate of mycelium. So all of those, when you hear some company talking about full spectrum, that's another tell that this is a product that they want to claim has mushroom in it, but it really doesn't. And interesting part is that recently I saw a video of one of these companies that a local station did on this big business that was in their neighborhood, and they showed you the whole process. And I kept looking at it going, okay, are they going to show the room growing all these mushrooms? Well, no, of course not. They didn't show that at all. And what they did show is at the very end, they showed this myceliated grain being busted up and put on screens and loaded into a dryer. And you could look at that going, well, I'm sorry, I don't see any mushrooms here anyway. There weren't any mushrooms because it was just this myceliated grain. And that's what they were showing right there, even though they make claims about full spectrum and call their products mushroom. And it's just a bait and switch is all it is. It's just a true bait and switch.
So, Jeff, just to cover one more point, because I know I'm going to be getting this question from patients, because I use a lot of lion's mane in my practice for patients that have dementia, Alzheimer's, cognitive decline, because it can help with brain health and nerve growth. And that lion's mane generally does have a sweetish taste. That is normal.
That is normal, but again, you have to be very careful, because these products that are manufactured on grain, these myceliated grain products, grain, Dr. Carri, is generally kind of sweetish. So you can't really be certain. You need to check very closely. And one of the things I'm going to do too is I will certainly alert your listeners to where they can get some of our products to be able to test it. And you as well, I've got a coupon for you so you can try our products, because I really want you to try it and then you can taste it. And the other thing here's a really interesting little test that anybody can do. Buy a little bottle of iodine. Take that product that you've got and stir it into a quarter cup of water. Take two capsules or something, stir it in there. Put some iodine drops in there. If it is starchy, it will turn black. It will absolutely turn black immediately, and it will stay black. That's just another very simple way to test one of these products, because a lot of your listeners, or I don't know, your patients, because I'm sure you're saying, well, you should take some lion's mane. Well, off they go to the store, and here it is. There's like 10 different products there. And I'll tell you right now, 80% of those products are going to be myceliated grain. And the store clerk will say, oh, yeah, this one here, this one's very popular. The popular products in most cases are not what you want to buy here. And also, just something that you should know is this clinical trial, and I'll send you the study, they took 3 grams, simply 3 grams of dried lion's mane powder, 3 grams. So that's something where whether it's like what we sell retail on the internet is a pouch of 60 grams. So that's something where you can measure out and get 3 grams. Or the other thing is, if you have fresh lion's mane, and there are parts, especially in the bigger cities, where you can buy fresh lion's mane, well, 3 grams, That's only 30 grams of fresh lion's mane. And what I would say is to make sure you're getting the benefits, you'd probably take twice that. But I just weighed up some mushrooms a couple days ago. I took some of the button mushrooms that you see out there, and they're pretty solid. They're heavy little mushrooms. But I took just a medium-sized one. I put it on the scale. It was 40 grams, one mushroom. So a person could actually get from, let's say, 2 or 3 fresh lion's mane, they could get a very good amount of those beta-glucans and those other compounds in lion's mane, which are called hericenones and erinacines. They could actually get those compounds just from eating the fresh lion's mane.
Jeff, how can our listeners find out more about you? And can you mention your websites? And do you have a website where the public can buy mushrooms from you direct?
My company website, and the name of my company is Nammex, Nammex. Our website's nammex.com. I encourage people to come there, especially for all the information that we have there about all things mushroom. We have very, very deep content there. And then if you're interested in actually buying some of our products, we have a website called realmushrooms.com, and that's where we sell our products direct to the public, and mostly from our websites, all online, a website or Amazon, realmushrooms.com. Nammex is a raw material supplier, so we supply other companies, and they put our products out under their label. Again, if you see products out there that talk about beta-glucans, it's probably our raw materials. But you can please come to Nammex, check out our information, a lot of information there. And if you have any questions, just email us. We'd be happy to answer your questions. And then you can get the products directly from realmushrooms.com.
Jeff, thank you for being my special guest today. This has been an awesome interview, and I've learned a lot.
You're very welcome. I'm very happy that you invited me on, and anytime you want to talk mushrooms, just give me a call.
I'll give you a call, yeah.
Very good.
All right, that wraps up this very special episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show with Jeff Chilton. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today, and I'd like to invite you back next time for another episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc. Have a great week, everyone.
You've been listening to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please tell your friends about the Functional Medicine Radio Show, and we'll see you next week with more from Dr. Carri.